They didn't stay because they loved you. They stayed because you were useful. You were light in a world that had grown too dark for them. A healer in disguise, giving, pouring, sacrificing, while they sat back and drank from your soul like it was theirs to consume. They smiled as you bent, thanked you as you broke, and praised your strength while they quietly erased it. They watched you give over and over, not once asking what it was costing you. They stayed not out of loyalty, but out of hunger. Your spirit fed something in them that they could never feed in themselves, and when you were finally empty, when your eyes dimmed and your hands stopped reaching, they left not with guilt, not with remorse, but with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had taken all they came for. This is not a story of love, it's a story of survival. Theirs, not yours, but today that story changes. Today you see it. Today you reclaim what they never thought you'd notice they stole. Predators of need, they stayed for what you gave. Not who you were, they didn't stay because your heart captivated them. They stayed because your heart served them. There's a brutal honesty hidden behind some relationships, the kind that masquerades as loyalty but feeds off convenience. These people weren't drawn to your essence. They were drawn to your output. The way you made them feel seen, supported, prioritized. You became their supply, not their sanctuary, and the worst part, they never had to ask. You gave so willingly, so naturally, thinking it was love, thinking that someday it would return to you in equal measure. But they were not mirrors, they were sponges, absorbing every ounce of your compassion, every spark of your presence, until they left you questioning your worth when you had nothing left to give. These weren't companions, they were opportunists wearing the mask of need. They clung to you not because you were special to them, but because you were useful. You softened their chaos, lifted their moods, validated their wounds, and became the answer to battles they never intended to fight themselves. They stayed through your storms not to hold the umbrella, but to use your strength as shelter. And you, in all your empathy, didn't see it. Not at first. You mistook their presence for devotion when all it was dependence. They didn't grow while you loved them. They fed on you so they could avoid growth. You were the escape from their discomfort, the distraction from their emptiness. And when the well began to dry, when your soul grew tired, when your silence started replacing your effort, they noticed, oh, they noticed, not because they missed you, but because they missed what you did for them. That's when the shift began, the passive withdrawal, the coldness, the sudden critique of how you've changed. Of course you had. You were finally burning out, but instead of helping you refill, they made you feel guilty for no longer being able to give. That was never love, that was consumption. They were predators, not with claws and cruelty, but with flattery, with need, with manipulation dressed in vulnerability. And when you were empty, when your energy could no longer serve their narrative, they left. Quietly, like nothing had happened, like you didn't bleed for them. And yet, you must understand, their leaving is not your failure. Their exit is the proof of everything you overlooked. They never stayed for you. They stayed for what you gave. And now that they're gone, you have something you didn't have before. Clarity. A painful, necessary clarity. The kind that builds walls without hardening the heart. The kind that teaches you to guard your light without dimming it. So let them go. Let them live off someone else's energy. Because you're done being their fuel. Slow theft in silence they took without taking blame. They never stormed in and shattered your world. No, their damage was far more subtle, far more dangerous. They came gently like a friend. They spoke softly like someone who understood. And with every interaction, every conversation, every smile that felt safe, they took a little more from you. Not enough for you to notice at first. Just enough to make you question whether it was really happening. That's how slow theft works. It's not loud. It's not violent. It's not obvious. It's quiet, methodical, invisible. They chipped away at your strength with back-handed compliments and well-timed silence. They didn't raise their voice. They raised your doubt. They didn't insult you directly. They just questioned your instincts, your memories, your right to feel. Over time, you became a version of yourself that felt smaller, more uncertain, more dependent on their validation. And that was the plan all along, because the more you needed their approval, the more control they had. They pretended to listen while dismissing your pain. They called it misunderstanding, not manipulation. They wrapped their selfishness in concern and labeled your instincts as overreactions. You gave them your trust because they didn't break it in one blow. They unraveled it thread by thread. And because they never technically hurt you in any obvious way, you kept telling yourself, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm the problem. That was their weapon, confusion. They made you second. Guess the very damage they caused. And while you were busy doubting yourself, they kept taking your energy, your attention, your light. They knew exactly how much to give to keep you hooked, how much to withhold to keep you desperate. It wasn't a relationship. It was a transaction with unspoken terms you never agreed to. They stayed long enough to benefit from your softness, and just short enough to never be held accountable for the aftermath. You tried to explain it to others, but you couldn't quite put it into words, could you? Because it wasn't what they did. It was how they made you feel, unseen, uncertain, slowly disappearing into someone you didn't recognize. And when the emptiness finally caught up with you, they distanced themselves with clean hands, pretending they had nothing to do with it. But you know better now. You see the pattern. You feel the weight of what they took, without ever appearing to take anything at all. And that's the cruel genius of slow theft. It robs you of your peace without ever making a sound. But here's the part they never expected. You survived it. You caught the silence in their strategy. You traced the missing pieces back to their shadow. And now, as you reclaim your voice, your space, your sense of self, they lose the only power they ever had, your blindness. No more quiet theft. No more unspoken surrender. You see it now, and because of that, they can never take from you again. You were the well they drank until nothing was left. You were never just a person to them. You were a resource, a well, a source of comfort, strength, encouragement, and peace. And the more you poured, the more they drank. They didn't ask how deep your well was, or whether it needed time to refill. They just kept taking, drawing from your compassion, your patience, your love, like it was endless. And because you loved deeply, you gave without condition. You didn't realize you were being emptied in the process. You thought they stayed because they valued you, when in truth, they stayed because they depended on the effect you had on them. You became their emotional fuel station, their moral compass, their therapist, their motivator. They built a life that stood because you were quietly holding up the walls. But who held you, who poured back into you, who noticed when your energy dropped, when your laughter faded, when your soul whispered for rest? No one, because they were too busy drawing buckets from the well to ask if it was running dry. You see, when someone sees you as a source instead of a soul, they will always focus on what you give, never on what you need. And so you became the listener, the fixer, the forgiver. You carried their moods. You healed their chaos. You gave second chances and thirds and fourths. Until one day you looked in the mirror and saw someone you barely recognized. Someone tired, hollow, dim. That was the moment the well began to crack. But instead of pausing to help, they complained that you'd changed. They resented that you no longer gave like you used to, as if you owed them that version of you forever, as if your emptiness was an inconvenience rather than a warning. They didn't leave when they should have helped. They didn't reflect when they should have apologized. They simply packed up and walked away, thirst quenched, mission complete, leaving you to rebuild from the ruins they pretended not to cause. But here's the truth. You weren't weak for giving. You weren't naive for loving. You were generous in a world that feeds on generosity without understanding its limits. You were the well, yes, but now you know that even wells must be guarded. Even wells must be protected, because love isn't just about pouring. It's about balance. It's about being seen as more than just a lifeline. And now that you've been emptied and survived it, you've learned the most important truth. You deserve to be filled too. Not used, not drained, not depended on like a crutch, but loved, honored, and chosen. Even when you have nothing left to give, from now on, let them bring a bucket, not a pipe. Let them ask if they may drink, not expect it as a right. You are still the well, but now you're the one who decides who gets a taste of your water. The disguised dependence they made you believe you needed them, they didn't just take from you. They twisted the roles until you believed you were the one who couldn't live without them. That was the craft, that was the trap. They disguised their dependence so cleverly that you mistook their need for love, their manipulation for care. You thought they were the strong ones, the grounded ones, the ones holding you steady. But look back closely. Who kept the conversations alive? Who forgave more? Who apologized more? Who stayed longer than they should have just to hold it all together? It wasn't them. It was you. And while you worked tirelessly to earn peace, they worked silently to make sure you never questioned your place beneath them. They didn't want balance. They wanted control. Not loud, aggressive control, but the soft, sneaky kind. The kind that convinces you to lower your standards just a little more each time. They trained you to believe that their mood swings were your fault, that their distance was your doing. They made themselves the measuring stick of your worth. They'd withdraw just enough affection to keep you chasing, offer just enough praise to keep you hopeful, then vanish emotionally the moment you showed the slightest need. It wasn't because they were independent. It was because they were afraid. Afraid you might wake up and see their power came only from your belief in it. So they mirrored your strengths and claimed them as their own. They leaned on your emotional intelligence and called it theirs. They depended on your ability to pick up the broken pieces and still painted themselves as the ones keeping things together. The disguise was perfect until you started needing something back. That's when the unraveling began. The moment you asked for support, clarity, consistency, they faltered. Why? Because they had nothing to give. They weren't the strong ones. They were surviving off your resilience. And when you needed them to stand up, to hold space, to be present, they collapsed under the weight of their own emptiness. That's when the mask slipped. That's when you saw the truth. They were never the anchor. They were the weight all along. You were the one holding steady. You were the safe place, the steady breath in the chaos, and they knew it. But instead of honoring it, they made you believe you needed them. Now you understand it was never about partnership. It was about dependence. Theirs, and your greatest power, is in finally seeing it, no longer shrinking to be needed, no longer clinging to the illusion of strength that was never theirs to begin with. You don't need them, you never did. They needed your light to hide their shadows, and now that the lights are on, you're free to walk await, older, wiser, and no longer fooled by those who called it love when it was really survival. Leaving you empty was the goal. The power they took was never theirs. It was never an accident. The emptiness you felt at the end, it wasn't just a side effect. It was the destination. The silent goal hiding beneath every fake apology, every carefully timed absence, every word that left you confused instead of comforted. They didn't just want your love. They wanted your fire. They wanted the part of you that believed in goodness, in second chances, in healing through love. Because in truth, people like that, those who carry darkness but refuse to confront it, don't seek partners, they seek hosts, carriers of the warmth they lost long ago, and when they find someone like you, someone kind, empathetic, hopeful, they don't love you. They study you. They learn your strengths so they can weaken them. They learn your fears so they can exploit them. They see your light not as something to admire, but something to possess, so they pour just enough sweetness into the beginning to earn your trust. They make you feel chosen, seen, important, not because they genuinely care, but because your investment makes the damage more effective later on. The deeper you feel for them, the more they can take without you resisting. They stay just long enough to train your heart to need them, and then the slow draining begins, a compliment laced with control, a silent treatment that teaches you to beg, a sudden shift in tone that makes you question yourself. You thought you were growing together when in reality you were being worn down, and the more confused you became, the more they smiled. Not always outwardly, but inside they knew. The more empty you felt, the more powerful they became. Because your confusion fed their control, your exhaustion made you easier to bend, and when you finally reached the point where you had nothing left to give, no more words, no more fight, no more warmth, they walked away. Not with sorrow, not with guilt, but with quiet satisfaction. Because for people like that, destruction is validation. They don't feel whole unless someone else is broken beside them. And your emptiness? That was the prize. But here's what they didn't expect: your return. Because emptiness, though painful, is not the end. It's the beginning. From that hollow silence, something rises. Awareness, strength, boundaries, clarity. You learn not to pour endlessly. You learn to protect your peace. And when you finally see that their power came only from your permission, something shifts. You stop being their victim and become your own protector. They emptied you to feel full, but they can't survive without a host and you. You've survived without them. That is the real victory. Because now they've lost the very thing that made them feel powerful, you. And you've gained the one thing they never wanted you to have yourself: whole, aware, untouchable.